Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Megan Rust, Interpretation Director here at the Frist Art Museum. And thank you all so much for joining us this evening. As is our custom here at the Frist Art Museum, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. The Frist Art Museum sits on land the Cherokee and Shawnee Native peoples, elders, and their ancestors call their homeland. We acknowledge and pay respect to them and offer deep gratitude to the ancestral land and water that support us. Today, we are excited to introduce the exhibition Monuments and Myths, the America of Sculptors Augustus Saint-Gaudens and Daniel Chester French, now on view in our upper level through May 24th. Co-organized by the American Federation of the Arts, Chesterwood, the home, studio, and gardens of French, and the Saint-Gaudens Memorial in partnership with the Saint-Gaudens National Historical Park, Monuments and Myths is the first major exhibition dedicated to the intersecting careers of these two foremost American sculptors of the Gilded Age. We're thrilled to have Dana Pilson with us this evening to introduce the show and offer us a sneak peek into its creation. But before I introduce Dana, I'd like to first remind you to please silence your cell phones and take a moment to find your nearest emergency exit while I thank our supporters. Support for the exhibition and publication of Monuments and Myths has been provided by the Gladys Kriebel Delmas Foundation. Major support for the publication has also been provided by the Wyeth Foundation for American Art. The exhibition is supported in part by the Sandra Shatton Foundation, and as always, we're grateful for the continued operating support from the Frist Foundation, Metro Arts, the Tennessee Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dana Pilson. Dana is the curatorial researcher and collections manager at Chesterwood. She has been working on curatorial and research projects there for over 10 years, and she's a member of the curatorial team for Monuments and Myths, and she also contributed to the catalogue. Please join me in welcoming Dana Pilson.
Hi, everyone. Just have to get used to the microphone. So let me know if you can't hear me or if there's any problems. Well, thank you, Megan, for that kind introduction. And thank you also to the Frist Director and CEO, Seth Feeman, Katie Delmay's curator, for inviting me to talk to you all tonight about Monuments and Myths, the America of Sculptors Augustus Saint-Gaudens and Daniel Chester French. Speaking for the combined Chesterwood Saint-Gaudens National Historical Park curatorial team, we are all so grateful to the staff at the American Federation of Arts for spearheading the traveling program and publishing the accompanying catalog, which is on sale in the gift shop, and to the entire staff at the Frist Art Museum for creating such an attractive presentation in the galleries and for organizing the opening festivities, of which this is one. If you haven't already seen the exhibition, I don't see the captions yet, but perhaps they'll click on in a moment. If you haven't already seen the exhibition, I can assure you that you're in for a treat. The enlarged photographs, the creative layout, thoughtful juxtapositions and placements of objects, this all creates a fascinating journey through the lives and careers of these two iconic American artists. There we go. Tonight, I'd like to share with you some aspects of the curatorial journey that we traveled to bring this exhibition to fruition, the origin story. The germ of the idea actually sprouted 5 years ago when Chesterwood's director, now director emerita, Donna Hassler, met up with the Saint-Gaudens National Historical Park's curator, Henry Duffy, who is now also retired, and Superintendent Rick Kendall, At the 2019 Historic Artists' Homes and Studios Workshop, which that year was being held at Chesterwood, the historic home, studio, and gardens of Daniel Chester French in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Both Chesterwood and the Saint-Gaudens National Historical Park, which is located in Cornish, New Hampshire, are members of the Historic Artists' Homes and Studios Consortium, of the Historic Artists' Homes and Studios Consortium of over 60 artists' homes, studios, and artist-designed environments, a program of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which also owns and operates Chesterwood. During that workshop, Rick, Henry, and Donna toured Chesterwood, and they spent some time in the new Collections Gallery, a state-of-the-art exhibition space repurposed from an old carriage house, a project generously funded by the Henry Luce Foundation. Both Rick and Henry were immediately struck by the many similarities between French and Saint-Gaudens. Like other sculptors of the time period around the turn of the 20th century, French and Saint-Gaudens often dealt with the same subject matter, such as Abraham Lincoln, commemorations of wartime heroes and memorials to those lost in the Civil War, monuments incorporating figures of victory, memorials that dealt with even more personal loss, portrait busts of influential individuals of the time period, including politicians, intellectuals, artists, and wealthy patrons. Also, delicate bas-reliefs. And I hope you can tell that I've shortened Augustus Saint-Gaudens to ASG and Daniel Chester French to DCF. Otherwise, all you would be able to see on these slides is their names. So I hope that is clear to you. Important coins and medallic work, and monumental sculptures celebrating America's early heroes, both real and mythical. Both artists sought artistic training in Europe, Saint-Gaudens at the prestigious École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, and French with the preeminent expatriate American sculptor Thomas Ball in Florence. They later found refuge from city life in rural New England, Saint-Gaudens in New Hampshire and French in Western Massachusetts, where both quickly found themselves at the centers of vibrant artistic communities. They collaborated with the best architects of the day, including Stanford White, Cass Gilbert, and Henry Bacon, and they employed many of the same models, same assistants, plaster casters, and marble carvers. They sat on the same committees, joined the same art clubs, and sent their works to the same exhibitions and World's Fairs. While these similarities could apply to numerous sculptors working at this time, looking more closely at Saint-Gaudens and French revealed even closer ties, many of which are explored in the exhibition and the catalogue. Although Saint-Gaudens and French are two of the greatest names in late 19th and early 20th century sculpture, they have never been examined together so closely. Saint-Gaudens has been the focus of quite a few exhibitions, including one that traveled to 12 venues between 2003 and 2005. And you can see that photo from that installation at the top. Works by French have been highlighted in a handful of smaller, more regional exhibitions in recent years, such as this exhibition, which focused on French's use of the female form, shown at the Boston Athenaeum in 2016. Yet the two artists had never been brought together in a single exhibition, zeroing in on their shared artistic tradition and subject matter, their studio practices, and their artistic lives at their summer estates. French himself would have been dubious of this idea. In 1916, almost a decade after the death of Augustus Saint-Gaudens, French wrote to his artist friend, Abbot Henderson Thayer, "As to your comparison of Saint-Gaudens and me, our work is so very different that it does not seem to me that any comparison is possible. I fear that posterity will not put me very near him, but I am sure posterity will find eternal pleasure in his work, and I hope some discerning people will find something agreeable in some of mine." The staff from the Saint-Gaudens site built a strong case for the joint exhibition and contacted Chesterwood. We agreed wholeheartedly that this was a project worth pursuing, and all felt that an outside organization that specialized in traveling exhibitions would be the best option, given staff limitations at both sites. Our museums, our sites are both very small, with staffs under 10, at Chesterwood, under 5 for full-time staff. At the suggestion of Thayer Tolles, curator in the American Paintings and Sculpture Department at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, who, by the way, is here tonight, and we're all so grateful for her support and expertise along this journey. At Thayer's suggestion, we set up an appointment to pitch the idea to Andrew Eschelbacher, then the head of curatorial affairs at the American Federation of Arts, a nonprofit organization founded in 1909 that is dedicated to enriching the public's experience and understanding of the visual arts through organizing and touring art exhibitions around the world. The appointment was set up for the first week in March 2020. I think we can all remember that eerie moment on the eve of the COVID epidemic. I think Grand Central might have actually looked just like that. The group met up under the clock in New York's Grand Central Terminal. They bumped elbows, I've heard, and walked over to the AFA offices. What came out of that first auspicious meeting was the feeling that we needed to make the artwork relevant to today, especially given growing racism and unrest and ongoing questioning of monuments and memorials around the country. How were we to create an exhibition about two artists who defined American sculpture during Gilded Age America amid calls to recontextualize, remove, or even destroy problematic public monuments? Growing scrutiny has revealed that much outdoor sculpture not only glorifies themes of white supremacy through memorializing those who fought for the Confederacy, but also memorializes Southern and Northern slaveholders, those who took part in the brutal Indian Wars, which robbed Native Americans of their land and autonomy, and the cultured elite at the top of the country's economic ladder, earning their wealth through exploiting workers, land, and other natural resources. The question remained, what could the works of French and Saint-Gaudens add to today's discussions about public sculpture? How can we look at their lives and careers through the varied lenses of today's world, including race, gender, economic inequality, etc.? Thankfully, the AFA would help craft an overarching narrative to appeal to multiple audiences and constituencies and to address these questions and issues. So shortly after that first meeting, COVID hit, our offices closed down, and if you can remember, we were all forced to work from home for an undisclosed amount of time. So now, attached to our laptops, instead of meeting face-to-face, all follow-up took place over Zoom. I officially joined the team, and my very first set of meeting notes for this project were dated April 2nd, 2020. Those notes reflect a lot of uncertainty about timing and just how were we going to organize a major exhibition when we couldn't even access research files or take a closer look at our objects. Thankfully, our institutions pivoted quickly, and we were able to get at least to our digital files through remote computer connections. We produced lists of objects that we thought should be included, and these are just a few. Works representing French and Saint-Gaudens as best-known sculptures, as well as lesser-known works and hidden gems. We also wanted to highlight the cooperative nature of sculptor studios, which included assistants, students, models, and so we added works highlighting those stories as well. The very first objects list included over 120 works of art. I'm showing you just a few thumbnail photographs, and the works by Saint-Gaudens are on the left, works by French or of French are on the right. We were aiming for about 75 objects total, about 30 or so from each site, along with a few key loans from other institutions. such as the Metropolitan Museum, the New York Historical Society, and the National Academy of Design in New York. These early conversations, hashing out the list of objects, as well as broader themes, took place in isolation. We were trapped at home. We brainstormed exotic venues for the exhibition throughout the country and even overseas. In September of 2020, we were now tentatively back at our sites, masking and rotating days to avoid overlapping. Things were still uncertain, and a COVID vaccine was months in the future. Andrew from the AFA bravely made the trip to Chesterwood from New York to review the collections and solidify selections for the exhibition. We ventured into Chesterwood's storage, where 3 large plaster working models by French caught Andrew's eye. These models hadn't been on public view for decades, and Andrew decided that he wanted the trio, although they were all in need of some major conservation. Elements needed to be reattached, arms shored up, cracks repaired. We agreed that these rarely exhibited works should be included, and thanks to the AFA, we would have funds to put towards their conservation. In the Chesterwood studio, Andrew gazed longingly at the 6-foot plaster model of the seated Lincoln. Could that be included in the exhibition? Imagining the logistics involved in moving such a complicated work, it is comprised of 8 separate plaster pieces and had undergone extensive conservation after returning from another loan in 2009, so unfortunately we had to say no. Andrew also asked if we'd consider lending the magnificent marble Andromeda, French's very last work, which has remained in the studio since his death in 1931. Oh, that's Andromeda, and that's Lincoln. Again, we had to say no. It is not only a favorite among Chesterwood visitors, but the logistics involved in transporting and exhibiting an almost 2-ton marble sculpture to 4 venues across the country seemed prohibitive to say the very least. Instead, we suggested including plaster models for these important works, which are more integral for understanding French's sculptural process. The final full-size plaster model of Andromeda is actually not being shown at the Frist due to spatial constraints, but 2 smaller maquettes, oopsies, go back. There, those 2. 2 smaller maquettes give viewers a good idea of French's working methods. Even the tiniest of the models includes the basic gestures of the body, as well as a silhouette for the overall composition. Instead of the 6-foot model of Lincoln, we offered the 3-foot model, which is more portable and more in scale with the other objects that were slowly comprising the core of the exhibition. As French's most well-known and iconic work, the Lincoln had to be represented in the exhibition, and this model proved to be the perfect compromise. And you can see it in our Chesterwood gallery that we have full-scale photographs of the work in situ behind the model. At the Saint-Gaudens site, the large bronze Diana was selected for the exhibition, along with many other key works exhibited at the site and in storage. Diana is arguably one of Saint-Gaudens' best-known works, and while smaller versions exist, the size and scale of the larger bronze would ensure that Diana would be a glorious centerpiece of the exhibition. And when you go upstairs, I think you'll agree that she really is. One of the most satisfying aspects of working on this exhibition was the development of the accompanying catalog. Catalogs can take years to produce and publish, so this part of the project was begun right away. Over Zoom, we brainstormed names of scholars at the forefront of scholarship today, who are thinking not only about sculpture and public monuments, but also about race and gender, economic status, and methods of production. Andrew from the AFA contacted the writers, and we put together an impressive table of contents. These insightful essays delve into specific themes and contextualize the artists and their sculpture. We all enjoyed picking out an image for the cover. I think that's always the best part. Once all the photography had been completed, two really stood out. French's Carlotta, a work derived from his memorial to the Beaux-Arts architect Richard Morris Hunt, is shown at the right. The image captured the many shades of the bronze patina and the object's overall beauty. For the back cover, Saint-Gaudens' study of a black soldier for Boston's Robert Gould Shaw and the Massachusetts 54th Regiment Memorial seemed to provide the right balance. And this is just a mock-up of the cover. The play between the different bronze finishes, the treatment of the facial features, the male, female, black, white, realistic, allegorical, and rough, smooth dichotomies all create a lively interplay that we hope invites people to pick up the catalog and take a look inside. So we settled upon the design that you see at the left, but later in color correction, this is towards the very end of producing the catalog, in color correction, we realized that the photograph of Carlotta had been flopped. There was just a tiny little detail on the side of her face that gave that away. She had been printed in mirror image. Although it was practically impossible to tell, we wanted the image to be as true as possible, which necessitated a very late game rejiggering on the cover design, which you see at the right. Chesterwood director emerita, Donna Hassler, and I contributed an essay to the catalog, focusing on the artist's rural retreats, exploring working methods, the roles of assistants, students, and models, and the importance of the artist's domestic lives at Cornish and Stockbridge. We were both fascinated by the similarities between Aspet and Chesterwood. French had visited Saint-Gaudens. Aspet is the name that Saint-Gaudens gave to his home in Cornish. French had visited Saint-Gaudens at Cornish in the early 1890s, and his time at the artist colony most likely sowed the seeds of his interest in finding his own country studio. While there, French must have been moved by the striking views of Mount Ascutney from the studio piazza. French purchased the former Warner Farm in Stockbridge in 1896, and he quickly relocated an existing barn and upon its foundation built a studio oriented towards Monument Mountain with a piazza of its own. Saint-Gaudens had made improvements to an existing inn on the property at Cornish. He had been renting the house, and he rendered it a comfortable living space with views, again, towards Mount Ascutney. French had the architect Henry Bacon design a residence for Chesterwood with views towards Monument Mountain. Both homes were decorated in the style of the times. They included eclectic mixes of antiques, landscape paintings, and classical sculpture, as well as with more contemporary works by their artist friends and colleagues. In both homes, portraits of family members hung alongside old masters. This created links with Europe in the past. Saint-Gaudens loved noise, laughter, and music, and a piano at Aspet was constantly in use. Likewise, French played opera records upon a Victrola in his studio, and his daughter enjoyed pumping a player piano. Both retreats attracted friends, family, and other artists, and both were lively with dinners, parties, outdoor activities, and merrymaking among young and old. And here are those views that I mentioned. Mount Ascutney at the top, Monument Mountain at the bottom. Both retreats featured elaborate gardens with sculpture, fountains, and outdoor rooms, enclosed spaces among the gardens and woodlands that provided vantage points and benches for relaxation. Saint-Gaudens built a small golf course and a sledding hill at Cornish. At Chesterwood, French installed a tennis court for his daughter, laid out woodland paths that led to shaded groves and hidden vistas. The rooms at Aspet and Chesterwood, as I said earlier, included an eclectic mix of furniture that announced the family's love of travel and their taste and their joy in entertaining. Here are the dining rooms as restored today, and we can see that the two families shared very similar tastes in furniture and art. And for some reason, this comparison has always interested me very much. For at Aspet, in the dining room today, which I think this work was in Saint-Gaudens' studio at one point, is a commercial plaster cast of Francesco Laurana's Unknown Woman from about 1500, the kind of Renaissance portraiture the American Larkin Mead was responding to in his portrait of a girl, which sits on the mantel in the Chesterwood dining room. Both French and Saint-Gaudens married artistically minded women. Augusta Homer Saint-Gaudens had an upper-class upbringing and was studying painting in Rome when the two met in 1873. French's wife and first cousin, Mary, was from an equally genteel background, and she grew up in Washington, D.C. She nurtured a lifelong interest in writing. She wrote plays and poetry and fiction. Her only published work, however, is a memoir of a sculptor's wife, which includes anecdotes about her upbringing and her life with French in New York and Stockbridge. Both women supported their husbands' artistic careers, managed the household, and oversaw a handful of servants while eking out time for their own creative endeavors. I don't think either Augusta or Mary are represented in the exhibition, so I'm happy to be able to show you their photos. Family was important to both artists. Margaret French, Daniel Chester French's daughter, went to school in New York and summered at Chesterwood. She played in the studio and posed for her father. Later, as a young adult, she threw lavish costume parties in the studio, and she studied sculpture with her father, eventually becoming known as a talented portrait sculptor. And what I think, personally, is her finest work, Girl with the Curls, is included upstairs in the exhibition. Strikingly beautiful, Margaret not only posed for her father, but many other artists who came to Chesterwood painted her portrait. French made this pastel portrait of Mary and Margaret in the summer of 1891 while he was at the art colony in Cornish. Saint-Gaudens' son Homer grew up at Cornish, and he also posed for his father and other artists, including John Singer Sargent, who painted this portrait of Augusta and the young Homer. Homer also grew up and went into the arts, and he became the director of the Carnegie Museum of Fine Arts in Pittsburgh, which now owns the Sargent portrait, and a replica hangs in the dining room at Aspet. Saint-Gaudens kept a separate household with the model Davida Johnson Clark, and they too had a child, Louis Saint-Gaudens, who was known as Novi. Our essay also focuses on the many students and assistants active in the two studios. Both French and Saint-Gaudens nurtured women artists, a rarity at the time. Evelyn Beatrice Longman studied and worked with French at Chesterwood and later went on to have a very successful career on her own. French provided her with recommendations and passed along commissions. He also came to rely on her astute criticism and often asked her to travel to his studio to see a work in progress. Frances Grimes worked at Cornish for almost a decade while Saint-Gaudens' health was failing. Her reminiscences provided us with a unique look into Saint-Gaudens' creative methods. For example, she wrote about how Saint-Gaudens depended very heavily upon his assistants and relied on them to craft his ideas in 3 dimensions. So Saint-Gaudens would come up with the idea and the students would do the work. After Saint-Gaudens' premature death in 1907, Frances Grimes completed many of his works according to his last wishes. As we worked on this essay, exciting new information came to light. A photograph that had been labeled with another model's name is now tentatively thought to show the African-American model Hetty Anderson, who posed both for French and Saint-Gaudens. At right, she is posing for the figure of achievement for the Jesse Parker Williams Memorial for a cemetery outside of Atlanta. And this is actually one of 2 works by French that memorialized Southern businessmen who fought on the side of the Confederacy during the Civil War. Oh, and on the left is a portrait of an unknown woman, but we think it possibly depicts Hetty Anderson as well. So the catalog came together with contributions from a variety of scholars addressing many of the overriding themes of the exhibition. I hope you'll pick up a copy and read fascinating essays about portraiture's ripple effects on the careers of the two artists, musings about memory and mending, the tantalizingly titled Ghosts on the Landscape, a probing look into female allegory, race, and the Civil War memorial, and finally an essay focusing on the artist's portraits of Lincoln in terms of mourning and remembrance by an emerging and talented young scholar. At the end of the catalog is a comprehensive timeline that charts the artists' intersecting lives and careers, their rivalries, letters and conversations, and mutual admiration and support of each other's works. Another important aspect of the exhibition was the writing of labels and other materials. Along with the objects, the labels and wall text tell the story of the exhibition and needed to be carefully crafted. We committed to making our labels 75 words or less per object. And this is a real challenge for art historians, carrying out a narrative with such a small word count. To avoid the overarching curatorial voice, we also included perspectives from outside the curatorial team, such as a Native American commenting on Saint-Gaudens' Puritan, as well as artist quotes, poems, and plenty of period photographs. Each venue then decides how much or how little they would like to have printed on their object labels. The staff at the Frist suggested many changes and improvements, mostly for readability and accessibility, and they also sought out additional outside voices as well. So I hope you'll look for those when you move through the exhibition. In order to show the artists in their best possible light, the objects needed to be in tip-top condition. Thanks to the AFA, we had funds to bring an objects conservator to Chesterwood to evaluate all of the works on the loan list. Some were ready to go with just a quick dusting off, others needed touch-ups, and still a few more required extensive conservation before receiving the okay to travel the country. Objects conservation is a very slow process, and we needed to make sure we had enough lead time ahead of the next phase of the project. Excuse me. Here are a few photographs of objects conservator Monica Berry at work on French's seated Abraham Lincoln at left and the working model for Manhattan. Excuse me. The peacock from the working model of Manhattan needed extensive repair. Photographs before and during treatment chart the progress of shoring up damage to the peacock's neck. Oh, excuse me. Whoops. I'm sure you didn't see that. A little bit wet. And after treatment photos confirm that he has a clean bill of health and is ready to travel. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm coming off of a bad cold. Can you still hear me? The microphone is so good, so we'll just keep muddling through. Excuse me. I know now everybody's going to want to cough. Okay, I hope I don't have to ask somebody else up here. Hold on one quick second. I'll let you enjoy looking at this photograph for a second while I recover. Would you like a cough drop? I would probably choke, and that would be even worse, but thank you. Thank you very much. We'll see if we can get through it, but thank you. Okay, so here we have photographer Bruce Schwartz from the Metropolitan Museum. He traveled to Stockbridge and Cornish, as well as to other lending institutions, to photograph the works of art for the catalogue. Many of the works had been freshly conserved, and some of the works at Chesterwood had not been photographed in over 20 years. So here's Bruce in Cornish photographing Saint-Gaudens' portrait of Civil War hero William Tecumseh Sherman. And you can see in this photo that you've been looking at for some time, that he set up an elaborate fabric tent to allow for the correct natural lighting. Photographing the head of Victory at Cornish. The head needs, excuse me, the head needs to be braced to stand on its own. I'm so sorry. In the end, Photoshop was used to brush out the supports from the final image included in the catalog. I'm very sorry. I just have to step away for a second. Okay, thank you. Oh, you were so sweet. Look at you. Oh my goodness. I should have you come up here. I'm so sorry. I am coming off a bad cold, so I apologize. No, I think I'll be okay. Thank you. And you were the sweetest thing. Thank you so much. Hopefully a future art historian in the making. I know you've sat this long. I'm so impressed. So here is Bruce photographing the head of Victory at Cornish. And you can see in the final image how much had to be really touched up for the catalog. At Chesterwood, here's Bruce photographing French's maquette for his Ulysses S. Grant equestrian. And I show you the final image again, right? And the model for the St. Paul's School War Memorial. French actually designed this model with removable wings, and for many years, the wings sat on shelves apart from the figures. During conservation, we located the wings and carefully inserted them into the back of the angel figure. Miraculously, but not surprisingly, knowing French's facility for engineering, the wings provided stability and the piece stands perfectly balanced. The AFA also funded framing of flat works, such as French's oil-on-canvas portrait of model Hetty Anderson, which had never before been exhibited. In fact, it had been in storage for so long, we only learned of this marvelous monochromatic portrait while cataloging the painting collection in preparation for moving the works into an alternative storage space. Also in storage was Saint-Gaudens' relief portrait of Sarah Redwood Lee, given to French as a token of their friendship. This work had a 1990s-era plexiglass shadow box from when it was lent to another exhibition, but we all agreed it would present much better in a period-style wooden frame. We brought these works to a professional framer in Hudson, New York, and I tried to find a photo of the inside of the frame shop, which had hundreds of frames, and we finally settled upon particular colors, gilding, and style to suit the works of art. Finally, in preparation for packing and shipping, all of Chesterwood's works that were being lent to the exhibition were brought to one location at the site. In April 2023, the AFA registrar arrived along with the packers and the shippers from Maquette Art Shipping Service. The works were meticulously packed into wooden crates that had been custom built to size. Here's Chesterwood's Wisconsin, there she is, in the process of packing, and a little box at her side, down there, holds a separate component of the work, a small eagle that perches atop the cup in her left hand. Similarly, wings, removable heads, and other separate pieces were carefully packed in their own boxes or compartments. Packing was a bit more spread out at the Saint-Gaudens site. Here they are working at the studio, packing a portrait into its custom box. It's a little hard to see. It's happening over here. And here again is Diana, and here's some other boxes that are being prepared. And here is Diana being fitted into her very specially made crate. And you can see that her bow and arrow have been removed for transport. The head of Victory is carefully loaded into her crate. Notice that it takes 3 people to move her safely. Works are actually packed into 2 crates, a box within a cushioned box. Sometimes 2 works of similar sizes can be packed in the larger crate together, and then they are transported together. At Chesterwood, finished packing crates were rolled into the collections gallery to await being moved onto the truck. And there they go. Look at that. The crates are then wheeled outside and mechanically lifted into the cargo area. And there they're finishing up. You can see it's a lot of hurry up and wait. A few weeks later, the trucks arrived at the first venue, the Jewel Collins Smith Museum at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. And the process is reversed. After allowing the crates to rest and the works inside to slowly come to room temperature and atmospheric pressure, the crates are opened, artwork is carefully examined for any condition changes during transport, and then the installation begins. So I have a few installation shots from the first venue, which is Auburn. Here, there's a lot of things going on in this photograph, and I apologize for the inclusion of the garbage pail. I did not take this photo. And here you can see they've been working on fine-tuning the lighting. It's sort of interesting to see a different museum's installation. And there's Diana in a very different orientation than how she is shown upstairs. So labels and wall texts are then affixed to the walls. Stanchions are placed if needed. Cases are shined and floors are swept. And then the doors open to the visitors. Months before the works even arrive at the venues, curators and exhibition designers lay out the exhibition. Most exhibition planning incorporates interactive computer-assisted design, allowing for flexibility and accuracy. So these are some of the mock-ups that we received from the Frist team. I have been in Nashville since Sunday, observing the fine-tuning of the exhibition in the galleries. And so just in the brief amount of time that we have left, I'll give you a quick overview of the exhibition. We enter the galleries and are introduced to the 2 sculptors through their portraits. Augustus Saint-Gaudens was born in Dublin, Ireland in 1848, the son of an Irish mother and a French father. His family immigrated to New York when he was just an infant. Daniel Chester French was born in 1850 in Exeter, New Hampshire, the 4th child of a New England family with roots in America that reached back hundreds of years. His family moved to Cambridge and Amherst, Massachusetts, before settling in Concord, Massachusetts in the 1860s. Living in New York City at age 13, Saint-Gaudens left formal schooling to begin an apprenticeship in cameo cutting. Achieving such detail in miniature was excellent preparation for his mastery of relief sculpture. He later described his days. I became so exhausted with the confining work of cameo cutting by day and drawing at night that in the morning, Mother literally dragged me out of bed, pushed me over to the washstand, where I gave myself a cat's lick, drove me to the table, administered my breakfast, and tumbled me down the stairs out into the streets, where I awoke. French's daily life in Concord was a little easier by comparison. He briefly attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, but failed most of his courses and returned home to work on the family farm. He eventually found his way to sculpture and was encouraged by his father. He took art lessons with May Alcott, the youngest Alcott daughter, and inspiration for Louisa May Alcott's Amy in Little Women. French also took anatomy classes in Boston and worked in the studio of noted sculptor John Quincy Adams Ward in New York City. His earliest works include portraits of his family and small tabletop figurines, such as the charming Imposing on Good Nature and its companion Retribution. French sold the decorative figural groups to a Boston company, which in turn sent them to England for mass production in Parian porcelain. Parian ware is an unglazed porcelain reminiscent of pure white marble, and it was actually becoming very popular among collectors in the growing middle class. The exhibition then focuses on the artist studios, great whirlwinds of production with a diverse group of models, students, assistants, plaster casters, and carvers. In this posed photo, we see French at work on his model for a figure of Brooklyn, and Brooklyn is actually in the exhibition, for New York's Manhattan Bridge. 2 studio assistants are included, and model Rosalie Miller, who was a budding opera singer, and I recently learned her father was from Memphis, Tennessee. She sits at the top of the set of stairs. Augustus Saint-Gaudens acknowledged all of the behind-the-scenes work that was integral to the creation of his art. For we constantly deal with practical problems, with molders, contractors, derricks, stonemen, ropes, builders, scaffoldings, marble assistants, bronze men, trucks, rubbish men, plasterers, and whatnot else. All the while trying to soar into the blue. Saint-Gaudens and French were also influential teachers and trained students in their workshops. They worked closely with other sculptors and architects on major commissions and regularly hired craftsmen skilled in the technical nuances of the sculptural process. Their studios were dynamic places of labor, creativity, and exchange. Frederick McManus joined Saint-Gaudens' studio at the age of 16 and quickly proved to be a sculptural prodigy. He traveled to Paris, where he won honorable mention for his Diana, a subject Saint-Gaudens also explored. Also in the exhibition upstairs is a bas-relief by Saint-Gaudens' female student, Helen Farnsworth Mears. And at right is Victory by Longman. While working with French, Evelyn Beatrice Longman secured the commission for Victory for the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, which celebrated the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase and American expansion. This statuette is a reduction after the monumental version that was installed in a place of honor atop the fair's Fine Arts Building. Artist models are also represented in this first gallery. Swedish-born Davida Johnson Clark, who I mentioned earlier, posed for many of Saint-Gaudens' allegorical figures, including Diana. This naturalistic portrait conveys the artist's sensitive attention to her features, including the evocative tilt of her head. Although much of their romantic relationship is shrouded in mystery, it is known that Saint-Gaudens used Davida as a model for many of his most important works. And on the right is Audrey Munson, who was one of French's favorite models. Daniel Chester French retained this portrait in his studio to use as a reference for future works. And he said of Munson, "There is a certain ethereal atmosphere about her that is rare. She is just such a type as many of the early painters would have selected for a Madonna." So I think that's quite telling. Hetty Anderson, who I mentioned earlier as well, was one of the most sought-after models in New York around the turn of the century. Saint-Gaudens and French hired her repeatedly, and she can be seen throughout the exhibition. We've included this etching by Anders Zorn, which provocatively captures Saint-Gaudens and Andersen resting after a long modeling session. Saint-Gaudens wrote to Zorn, "Your masterpiece hangs in my studio and is a constant pleasure. I wish I could repay you for it. You know I promised you a reduction of the nude of the goddess-like Miss Andersen, but it was destroyed in the fire. In its stead, I send you my study of the head of Victory for the Sherman Group." From the beginnings of their careers, Saint-Gaudens and French were highly sought-after portraitists. Both were experts in idealized naturalism. A portrait by Saint-Gaudens or French was a status symbol, the mark of a refined eye, and a sign of inclusion within a network of important individuals. Early in their careers, both sculptors sought to honor their father's influence and support with portrait busts. Saint-Gaudens was only 19 years old and about to depart for Europe when he hurriedly completed this portrait of his father. French received a great deal of support and encouragement from his father, who, as an assistant in the Treasury Department in the 1880s, secured commissions for allegorical sculpture for government buildings, which helped to firmly establish French's career. Henry Flagg French, a highly educated lawyer and judge, was known for his wit and wisdom, and much of his personality is captured here. Other portraits in the exhibition include French's bronze of the esteemed philosopher and writer Ralph Waldo Emerson, modeled from life in Concord, Massachusetts, over the course of nearly 20 sittings. The elderly subject's animated expression and distinctive facial features, including his fashionable side whiskers, are naturalistically conveyed. Upon seeing the finished work, Emerson is said to have remarked, "That is the face I shave." On the left is Saint-Gaudens' portrait of U.S. Attorney General William Maxwell Evarts, who would become an influential patron of the sculptor, encouraging friends and colleagues to seek Saint-Gaudens' services. As scholar Thayer Tolles wrote in the catalogue, these two portraits exemplify how French and Saint-Gaudens were able to infiltrate broader networks of patrons, critics, and artists. While now eclipsed by their signature monuments, these portraits are fundamental to understanding what drove these artists to succeed as the leading public sculptors of their era. In the portrait section, there are also some beautiful portraits of women, including Saint-Gaudens' relief of John Singer Sargent's sister Violet as she tunes her guitar, and French's masterful likeness of the wealthy Cornelia Fanning Gay of Boston. And you can obviously take closer looks at both of them upstairs. Another section examines monuments and architectural sculptures designed to communicate ideas of national grandeur in civic spaces. In the wake of the Civil War, the United States experienced a boom in monument building as private patrons and civic groups aggressively commissioned public artworks, aiming to unify Americans, celebrate national achievement, and stress shared values. Naturalism and classical solemnity combine eloquently, bless you, in Saint-Gaudens' Puritan at left and French's Minuteman at right. The young farmer turned Revolutionary War soldier moves away from his plow and steps forward in readiness, musket grasped firmly in his right hand. Meanwhile, the Puritan deacon, holding a Bible and clad in a billowing cape, marches across the landscape, forcing European civilization and piety upon a continent perceived as untamed, despite already being settled by indigenous peoples. Diana and Wisconsin were both designed to surmount very tall metropolitan buildings. Beaux-Arts architecture often incorporated decorative, allegorical sculpture to convey the shared history and civic values of the wealthy elite. Diana was designed as a weather vane for Stanford White's Madison Square Garden, and Wisconsin to stand atop the Wisconsin State Capitol in Madison. Idealized with classical Greek and Roman antecedents, Diana assertively shoots her arrow into the wind, while Wisconsin, reminiscent of the great Athena Parthenos, which I think you all must know, signifies forward, Wisconsin's state motto, exemplifying progressivity. Another section highlights French's and Saint-Gaudens' monuments to Abraham Lincoln and Civil War memory. They each created 2 public monuments in Lincoln's honor. Their portraits highlight Lincoln's seriousness and humanity and have become central to America's memorial landscape. Both sculptors relied upon life masks of Lincoln's face and hands made by Leonard Volk, as well as photographs and written reminiscences of the president. While Saint-Gaudens' Lincoln is similar to the final monument, French's design would undergo a few additional changes before the final work was carved in marble by the Piccirilli brothers, Italian immigrants who carved many of French's as well as Saint-Gaudens' works in marble. The last section showcases funerary monuments by French and Saint-Gaudens, looking at their participation in America's shifting attitudes towards public mourning. Between 1860 and 1920, Americans experienced the Civil War, World War I, and the influenza epidemic of 1918. The scale of human loss during those years was unfathomable, and the 2 sculptors were vital in shaping new attitudes towards grief and memorialization. At left is Saint-Gaudens' Amor Caritas, a stoic angel personifying love and charity. French's spirit of life is all uplifting ebullience. Stoicism combined with hopefulness find expression in many of their works, mourning and the mystery of death expressed through beauty and optimism. So on behalf of Chesterwood and the Saint-Gaudens National Historical Park, I am so pleased to introduce this exhibition to you. We are dedicated to preserving the art and memory of French and Saint-Gaudens, and part of our mission is to keep the artists and their works relevant in the public eye. Traveling exhibitions like this one provide us with the opportunity to reevaluate their works in light of new trends, and also continuing scholarship in art history and new fresh voices that enhance our understanding of their sculpture and their continued relevance to audiences today. I find it interesting that this exhibition is on view at the Frist at the same time as 2 other very important exhibitions, Southern Modern and The Art of LaToya M. Hobbs. As I toured the museum earlier this week, I was struck by the many connections between these 3 exhibitions. Although French and Saint-Gaudens practice their craft many miles north of here, mostly creating for northern urban audiences, their art is at once universal and personal, and the faces, histories, and beauty still speak to us here and today. In 1918, French contributed an essay about Saint-Gaudens, who had died a decade earlier, to the Proceedings of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He lavished high praise upon his late colleague and friend. Yet, as we read his words, we might think of both artists. To everything that he did, he gave the best that was in him, with a thoroughness born of conscientiousness and of devotion to the art that he loved and revered. So I thank you for your attention and your patience with my recovery from my cold. And I truly hope you enjoy the exhibition, which, as Megan mentioned, remains on view until the end of May. So thank you very much. So it's exactly 7:30. I don't see Megan. There she is. I'm not sure of our actual plan, if there's any questions or if anyone is eager to enjoy the last half hour of the exhibition, which will be open, I think, until 8 o'clock tonight. So if there are any questions, we can either do them publicly or you're welcome to come up and talk to me afterwards. Okay. So please come up and I'm happy to chat if you have any specific questions.